President Bola Tinubu has suspended the Minister of Humanitarian Affairs and Poverty Alleviation, Betta Edu, from office with immediate effect. The presidential spokesman, Ajuri Ngelale, announced the minister's suspension in a statement on Monday. The president further directed the executive chairman of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, to conduct a thorough investigation into all aspects of the financial transactions involving the Federal Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs and Poverty Alleviation, as well as one or more agencies thereunder. Now, reports which trickled in later say the suspended minister was further denied access to President Tinubu in Aso Rock shortly after her suspension on Monday afternoon. The executive chairman of Economic Growth and Development Center and former national coordinator of the National Poverty Eradication Program, Professor Magnus Kpakol, joins us now to discuss ways the social investment program of the federal government is being managed and how to make it more transparent and ensure that targeted beneficiaries are reached. Good to have you here on Arise News. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Cynthia, and good afternoon, Bimbai. Very nice to be with you guys.
And we're thrilled to have you as well. So, of course, thank you for being here. Now, it appears as quite as clear as day that the social investment program is being mismanaged. I'm wondering what you, based on the crucial role which you've played in the past as former national coordinator of NAPEP, what you'd like to see to ensure better transparency and also to ensure that the targets that are supposed to reach are actually reached in terms of beneficiaries.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. Well, first of all, it's unfortunate that what has happened has happened. I thought that they were doing a good job in the ministry. But I think that, let me just say this right away. The name of the ministry is Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs and Poverty Alleviation. But what I notice sometimes is the lack of real focus on poverty alleviation. When you look at their website, you go through the website, you don't see too many programs talking about advocacy on poverty alleviation, talking directly on that. The president himself typically talks about poverty alleviation, and I commend him for that because that is a grave problem that is facing the nation. As we all know, they're always and everywhere, the poverty is a clear reflection of the level of human capital deficiency in the country. So what we have in the country is a grave level of human capital deficiency. That's why, as a country, we have more people in poverty than any other country in the world at this time, even larger than India, representing well over 11% of the total number of people in poverty in the world, when we only represent about 2.5, 2.7% of the population of the world. So it shows that this is a serious problem that faces us as a nation, and we've got to take it very seriously. And as you said, we have therefore the necessity, it's a matter of necessity and urgency, that we come up with the best kinds of methods, to address this problem. The way we've been doing it, even including my time, and I have to give kudos to people who try to run these programs because there's a lot of influence that you get all over the place, from everywhere. They're trying to have you do it this way or that way. But I think that the way we've been fighting poverty in Nigeria is not correct. The way we've been fighting poverty in Africa is really not correct. That's the reason we have massive numbers of people in poverty. You don't fight poverty just by taking money and giving to people. That will never end poverty anywhere. Poverty is ended by creating well-paying jobs, by making sure that we are producing. We've got to subdue the earth. The way to subdue the earth is to train people to have the skills to produce the goods and services that the people of the world want. Now, when you can't get everybody into the mainstream of that mode of production, then as you have those who fall through the cracks, you can have a way of supporting them through, for me, initially, microcredit. Microcredit is a very, very powerful tool that we need to use. We are now working with our microfinance institutions across the country. It is essential that we support microfinance institutions. We have states, local governments, and the federal government supporting microfinance institutions and helping them, giving them funds. There are a number of ways to do this. Lending money to them is one way, so that they can lend, they can go ahead and on-lend to people. And it's easier to get your money back that way. It's very transparent, so you can get your money directly back from microfinance institutions. The records will be there. Now, those who fall through those cracks, where there are some people that cannot get microcredit, then for those people, you give them this conditional cash transfers. As you may know, I introduced the conditional cash transfer into Nigeria when we had the program in 2006, 2007, with the support of the MDG office. But I actually literally introduced a very unique brand of conditional cash transfer, which we don't use as we should. A type of brand that does not set up a welfare state, where you keep people on welfare and keep supporting them interminably. So if you do it the right way, you will never need to have cash anywhere that you hand to people directly. So there are ways of doing this. So you pay this money through microfinance institutions. The records will be there. It will be done electronically. The microfinance institutions can go to even the remotest of places, if it needs to be, on motorcycles. And they will have their instruments with them on the days of disbursement in the presence of chiefs and people. And the people who have been selected will be given these resources. But we tend not to do it that way for a number of reasons. Sometimes we use these programs for politics, and that never helps our society. So as a matter of, I don't know if we have the time, but I have clear methods that you can use to provide resources to people without having these kinds of problems. Even on the gas, on the fuel subsidy issue, I have submitted papers to the government several times on how you can provide a temporary economic assistance card to people. And we can have only designated people get fuel subsidy. I am not against removing fuel subsidy for the rich, but I think that we should have fuel subsidy for certain categories of people for a country like ours. The people are suffering. We have an inflation rate of over 28%. Then we have the kind of suffering that people go through walking sometimes because they can't afford simple basic transportation across the country. There are ways of supporting them and doing it adequately. Let me say one more thing. The federal government sometimes is too arrogant. And this is how it has been since any time. I'm not talking about this administration alone. Even when I was in the government, I always said that the federal government was too arrogant. The federal government cannot do it alone. They cannot. We have seen that they cannot. So we have to have programs that bring together federal, state, and local, and the private sector, and personalities that can help. There are ways of doing these kinds of coordination. And this is what I expected would be done in the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs and Poverty Alleviation. I know that there are some individuals in that ministry, even now, some that were my colleagues when I was in government, that are very capable and understand some of the wonderful things that can be done. And so in that ministry, we come up with policies for coordinating programs transparently that can reach the people and that can be effective.
Right. Thank you for that very detailed and insightful overview of this subject matter. Now, what I want to take a look at is I want to take a look at, some moments from your experience, because during your time as well, you were alleged to have some questions to answer. You were questioned for about 20 billion allocated to NAPEP. Now, can you tell me... I was not
questioned for 20 billion. I was questioned for 32 billion, but go ahead.
32 billion. Excuse that, 32 billion. Now, Given your experience, what is it about social investment programs, poverty alleviation schemes, humanitarian schemes? What are the loopholes that lead to the lack of accountability and that lead to the increased suspicion with regards to these departments?
Yeah, very, very good question. I think, as I said in the beginning, because there are a lot of interests, sometimes politicians get very involved. They think it's something that you're supposed to use for driving politics. I remember once somebody accosted me in the president's office, a very high-level person, and said, "Oh, are we still doing this?" I said, "How about that, NAPEP? Are we still doing that?" And I said, "You don't do it. It's not something that we're doing," because I understood what he meant. The idea is that you just give people money. I was never in the program or in the practice of just handing people money. And that's why I mentioned to you that I was accused of 32 billion when I never seen anything near more than 1.5 billion, 2 billion per year, the whole time I was in my job. But you get all kinds of ridiculous allegations. As you see, I'm here and I go back and forth between Nigeria and the rest of the world. Obviously, I don't know. People come up with some kinds of ideas, from time to time. I think it's just because of the politics of it. Because they think you have a lot of money. They think that somehow there's money coming. I have people who would say money came from the World Bank, money came from outside. Money never came from anywhere to me. It just never happened. It didn't happen. And of course, when they did all the basic investigations, they found out, I believe they found out that they were off. They were grossly off. So, but I don't know why, but these allegations tend to come up. Now, what you try to do is not to fall into people's hands. You never, first of all, like I never saw a NAPEP checkbook the whole time I was in government. I never saw it. I never got near the money. My idea was the policy, making sure that you got to try to stay above board. But even with that, you're going to get people come at you and say that somehow you have taken 100 billion, 500 billion, and so on and so forth, when my budget never got near that. Now, what we did partnerships, and we made it so transparent by just having states be involved. Every penny that I spent in a state was done in partnership with the state governor. I can tell you right now, the biggest amount of money that I got in partnership was from Bayelsa State with Goodluck Jonathan. I brought, I only had about 20. In fact, he laughed at me, literally. We had 20 million naira. That's all we provided. And Goodluck Jonathan provided 2 billion in collaboration. And we set up an office in his state, and he administered the program. We did the same thing in River State, where Peter Odili brought 1 billion naira. We had it in Katsina. Yaradua brought 200 million naira. We had it in Kaduna. They brought 50 billion. We had it all over the country. So the way to do it, as I said, is to do it in partnership. I never spent the money directly by myself. It is risky to do that. And you can get a lot of unnecessary, unwanted attention when you bring out money. I never spend any money from my office directly. You can't do that. That's a trap you don't fall into. So I always did it in partnership. We had a program called a multi-partnership fund. I think I've forgotten exactly what we call it. Something like that. Multi-partner partnership fund, something like that, where we collaborated with banks, with states, and then we provided money. In fact, Oceanic Bank at the time, as a private institution, provided 7 billion naira into that. You cannot take Oceanic Bank's money. You cannot take a state government's money. So it would be impossible to do that when you have these partnerships. And that's why I encourage the federal government to engage in these partnerships. You have a joint account, and then you're able to provide funding. But even so, it's not easy because there's going to be a lot of political influence. But you can walk through it. You can make it. These programs are extremely important. But I think, as I said, the main way of fighting poverty, as the president is doing, is to make sure that you buoy up the economy. So that if we are not producing the goods and services that the people of the world want, we will never be able to fight poverty. You can't fight poverty just by doing conditional cash transfers. You cannot. It's not going to work. You can't even fight it just by providing microcredit. We've got to train our people. When I hear people talk about human capital development, I'm sorry to say, but I'm not so sure that we understand what human capital development is. Well, human capital development is not just sending people to school or building healthcare facilities. Human capital development must end in actual production of output. When we were teaching elementary economics, we would teach the students that capital is any product, any good that is produced, so you can use to produce other goods. So, well, the same thing goes for human capital. If you produce a human capital and it is not producing something, well, you produce what you think is human capital and it is not producing goods and services that the people of the world want, then it is not human capital. It is only human capital when it is ready to produce stuff, when it is producing something. Well, that's not what's happening. So that's one area where we fail. We have human capital. I can tell you now, I have written a document that I've attempted to send to this president, and I've sent to some government officials about how to institutionalize human capital in Nigeria. We gotta be able to do that. If we don't do it, we will not succeed. I can tell you that right now. If we don't understand how to do it, it is not going to work. As I said, the human poverty is a direct reflection of human capital deficiency.
We certainly hear you, Professor. We certainly hear you, and thank you for those very imperative points that you've raised. Something's worth repeating now, the fact that you said some of these funds are used for political interest and driving politics, and that there needs to be more human capital development must end in the actual production of the output. Away from this, we've seen the likes of for instance, the founder of the Albino Foundation, just before when the ministers were being appointed, saying that we should have people with disabilities considered for the sake of inclusivity. But I'm also wondering that if we had potentially, I don't know, I'm asking you, if we had a minister that could relate to the beneficiaries who are supposed to benefit from this program, do you think it would make any difference whatsoever, since it's not just a head thing, but a heart thing in terms of empathy, knowing what they're actually going through?
Yeah, very wonderful question. First of all, my good friend Jackie Pele, he always has wonderful ideas, and I almost always support whatever he says. He's right. You've got to have passion in what you do, and I can tell you, if you don't have passion in your work, then you're just basically wasting your time. If they ask you to be the chief sweeper in Abuja, you gotta sweep it so well that everybody wants to take that job from you. And I think that sometimes that may be an issue, I don't know. But I've always thought that whenever you have a job, if you take up a job, you got to show the passion for it. And the passion has to result in output, regardless of the amount of resources that you have. So I agree with you there. I think, and that's why I say this thing. Our leaders don't like to go through training for some reason. I'm doing some training over here where I am. I'm going to be speaking at a very big institution in a couple of days here, and this is Canada. Now, these people, they come for training. All the elected officials come for economic development training. This happens. You go to the big economies of the world, and they're doing economic development. So, my organization, our name is Economic Growth and Development. That's what we do. So you want every elected official to go through training. They have to. Nobody knows everything. So from the ministers, the governors, all these guys must go through training. And we must understand that it needs passion for us to be successful. So this is the thing. And it's not a one-time thing. We need continuing education for people. So it never ends. And we got to make sure that we tie to the output that is put out there. So I think that the passion thing is extremely crucial and important for us to be successful.
It certainly is, but one might argue that, Is it really a training issue? Because when you look at the systems that are available, there are incredible products and systems. You look at Empower, you look at Trader Money, you look at the creation of the social register. The intention and the professionalism behind it is there. But some might argue that what's lacking is not the competency or the capacity, but the sheer will to do things in a transparent and accountable way. How do we overcome this human factor that we see not just in this aspect, but in all aspects of beyond government, even in industry and in daily life?
Training. I know, it sounds funny, but it's training. That's what it is. You just keep on doing it. You keep on doing it. You started early. You started in the elementary schools, in the high school, the universities, and in the workplace, the private sector or public sector. You keep pumping that into the heads of people. You keep talking about it. The president talks about it. And I like the president talks about poverty a lot. I'm really impressed that he talks about it comprehensively, about how to produce, how to have. I see it. And I think that as he talks about it, and he goes into conferences with his team, and they talk about it, and they connect people to it. You're right. It's the training by itself. If you just get a certificate, that's nothing. It's just like going to get a certificate from a university. Credentialism is not the answer. Having certificates on your wall is not the answer. You can have 50 PhDs in surgery, and that doesn't do a darn thing if you don't have the mind and the passion for surgery to want to do it well. It's not going to work. Behavioral skills are very important. When I talk about human capital development, I'm not just talking about experiential knowledge or formal education, where you get some degree or some skill somewhere. I'm also talking about attitudinal, emotional, and behavioral skills, training in those kinds of areas. So people understand that, in fact, you can ruin your whole career if the behavior is bad. So we've got to have these behavioral skills, global skills, attitudinal skills, emotional skills that are taught to people throughout government, in the private sector, to elected officials on a regular basis. I can tell you this for sure, we can do it. Nigeria is a mighty country. Nigeria, we have the capacity to do it. We have the capacity, we have the wherewithal, the natural resources, the physical resources, the human resources, we've got them. We've got to be able to do these things, but we don't. There's a reason. The reason is the behavior. Some people call it culture, but that's what it is. We've got to build these things in our cultural ecosystem. People to understand that it is important. It is reprehensible not to be able to do things for our country and to be proud of what we're able to do for the country. Oftentimes people get into a position and they're happy that they just got into a position. That's not what the thing is. You should be happy about what you do when you get into the position. I mean, you don't just get into a position and you tell people, oh, I've got this position. Oh, I put so-and-so in a position. That's not what it's all about. What it's about is impact on the people, how we can raise our per capita GDP from right now below $2,000. Nigeria should have no business with a GDP per capita under $10,000, but we have it now well over $2,000. And I can tell you that our actual, what I consider a real actual per capita GDP is probably under $1,000. I don't have time to get into that now, but I think that that's what it is. It is skewed up because of the little oil that we have. And that's serious. Now, of course, when we talk about oil, that's the main thing we have now. If you go to like Bangladesh is putting out apparel to the world to the tune of about $45 billion every year. They're the second largest producer of apparel. Exporter, not producer, but exporter of apparel. $45 billion. That's as much as we send out sometimes with crude oil. Now, we should have the capacity to put out $50 billion in apparel.
Professor,
we've got to engage people to do it.
You've spoken very well. We've spoken very well, and we certainly appreciate your recommendations, your time, and your insight. Thank you so much, Professor Magnus Kpakol, former National Coordinator of the National Poverty Eradication Program. Thank you for joining us here on Newsday.